So how many of you have heard about podcast? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead. What do you think of podcast? Or what do you mean by podcast? Yes, Devani.
Yes. So it's some experience or a story or their opinions which people are, it's only the voice. And so I do listen to sometimes, when you're driving, but then that time I'm not focusing, very honestly.
Okay.
So I have personally not been into really listening to podcasts, very honest. But I'm teaching in a business school, ICFI business school,
Right.
and one of the subjects that I teach is business communication.
Okay. Wonderful.
So, yeah, so one of the things that they have introduced now is that we need to get our students to do a podcast. So
Okay.
I said, if I have to tell my students to do a podcast, first I should know how to go about it. And it was like a golden opportunity when you offered that. I said, my God, God really listens to your voice. I mean, I believe in that. He just makes things
Wonderful.
happen.
So,
Yeah.
so, so,
Thank you so much.
so,
Uh,
coming to that point, God also listened to me in 2018. You know how it started. I started my podcast in 2019. My first podcast name was Sales Ka Tadka, and
mm,
it was all about sales. I worked in corporate for 2.2 decades, and
mm,
then I moved to freelancing,
mm,
training and
mm,
consulting
mm,
coaching.
mm, mm,
And then, I did my Udemy courses. So I have
mm.
courses on Udemy. So
Okay.
uh, once they called us, when they were starting their India office. They
Mm,
called all the instructors in India to Delhi, and
mm-hmm.
there I won this Blue Yeti mic,
Wow.
which was supposed to be the best mic at that point of time in 2018,
Uh-huh.
and I got it as a gift because of my course.
Mm,
And I came back to Nagpur thinking, what will I do with this mic?
mm,
And then I started searching, what can I do alone again with this mic? And then I
mm,
came across podcast. That time,
mm,
podcast was nascent, right?
mm,
And
mm,
then I started searching about it, reading about it, and then I came to know that there are no Hindi language sales podcast available in India.
mm-hmm.
And I got so much of information through Google, and I started learning editing and doing recording and all that stuff. And I learned and I launched my podcast in 2019 after 6 months, struggling for 6 months, right? And I never knew. Earlier, I used to thought that it's a very tough thing to do, and
Mm-hmm.
it requires a lot of money and all that stuff. But then I said, no, it is very easy. Why people are making it, so much of gung-ho about it?
Mm,
Anyone can do it with a little bit of will, because
mm,
otherwise, you can start your podcast actually using your mobile phone
mm,
today itself.
mm.
So
Okay.
then what happened
Mm,
with this podcast?
mm,
One of the best studio in Nagpur, the
mm,
owner came to me in
mm,
lockdown. So
mm,
I launched my podcast, and then after 6, 7 months, first lockdown happened. And
mm,
his business was recording, and he's a great sound recording engineer and artist.
mm,
So he called me up. He said, I listened to your podcast, and you are from Nagpur. I don't know. So
mm,
let's meet. And
mm.
then I met with him, and we started his own podcast also. And he has
Wow.
got a great studio,
Mm-hmm.
and the quality was exceptionally well. He was so happy, and we launched around 50 podcasts in that phase with his help. And
Amazing.
this is he's one of the great artists in India. He doesn't want to come in front of the people, so he never allows me to use his photograph also. So this is how I started my podcast. Now, what is podcast? To go literally in terms, what is podcast? A podcast is a episodic series of spoken words, and which are digital audio files that user can download to a personal device for easy listening. Now, this is the academic, explanation of
Definitely.
what is podcast. Yep. But podcast is actually introduced to the world thanks to Steve Jobs by Steve Jobs, Apple. It is a
Mm,
combination of two words, which is iPod and broadcast. So when the first revolution happened for iPod, that time they also launched this, and they said ki you can create a long form of content, not only music, but also various kind of audio content which you can broadcast. 30th September is known as International Podcast Day. So mark these, now next month, 30th September is there. So you can plan your podcast activity around it, and you can, really do good with this date. Now, why we should start a podcast? Why? We always ask ourselves, why should I do something? So why podcast is important for me? So now in India, it is estimated that around 5.75 crore Indians are listening to podcasts regularly, right? And now I will tell you one more important aspect. Over a period of last 6-7 months, there are humongous amount of podcasts which are coming in video format also, right? So that listenership is different, viewership is different than these numbers. These are actual numbers which are downloaded by audiences on their devices. So it is, and India is the third biggest consumer of podcast in the world. It is growing at triple digit CAGR. So we are actually growing very fast. 50% of the Indians have listened to the podcast at least once. At least once, right? So Indians are aware about what podcast is, right? In January 2023, there were around 25 lakh podcasts which were currently available on Apple iTunes. Now, let's come to the tangible benefits of podcast, right? 54% of podcast listeners, they say that they always think about the product which they listen to in advertisement of podcast. So conversion because podcast is a very one-to-one medium with your listeners. People get really engaged with you deeply when you speak and say something. They listen to you very intently. There are no distractions, right? And products and brands advertise their, typically advertise their brands and products on a podcast which has roughly around 5,000 downloads per episode. So you can really monetize it if you want to monetize it, right? But I will not recommend you to start a podcast for starting a monetization. There are different kind of intangible benefits which you will get that were coming in the next slide, right? So why to start a podcast? So first answer is it's very easy to start a podcast. If I tell you to start a YouTube channel, you need so many things: proper lighting, good quality camera, proper location, voice, your attire, all your about looks, and then content. As usual, everything is important. But then this camera kind of a thing add a lot of stress to people, and many people are shy to face camera. So here it is only audio, so it's very easy to start. Second important point is podcast allow you to produce long form of content. Long form of content. Now, where we are in a world where 30-second reel is also boring for many people, and you swipe the reel, wherein people will listen to your podcast for 40-45 minutes. Just imagine the amount of engagement you will have with them, right? There are now, currently the trend is the longest form of podcast is around 5.5 hours. There are certain people in India who are creating podcast which is at least 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours, one episode. Even as a listener, it takes me around 3-5 days to consume that podcast. But then there are people and there are listeners to it. So this is not possible in YouTube or any other medium, right? Another thing, your podcast will support your personal brand. I think we are listening this in a number of times within the group also to promote your personal brand. This is another way of supporting your personal brand, right? You create and build your personal connection with your audience. You, when we speak, when we create episode, we speak as if people are sitting in front of you, right? So they have a direct connection with you. People will write you, and when it will be immense joy to you when somebody unknown person sitting in New Zealand sending you an email saying that, hey, I listened to your that podcast and I like that point, right? Why can't you create another episode on these of these things, right? So that will give you another kind of a zing, right? It also provides you a repeat touch point for your audience. Now life is all about keywords and Google, right? If I want to search for a sales trainer, I can simply go there and search for a sales trainer. But Google will promote you in that search if your podcast or YouTube channel or LinkedIn profile or something different. The best part is now Google have started indexing podcast uh, separately, and it is showing them and it is giving them priority. Also, YouTube have started adding podcast separately in YouTube channel. So you can use that also, right? Camera fear, people, those who fear camera can easily do it. Another important point is you don't require screen time. You can consume your podcast without looking at a screen for, more than 30 seconds. Another important advantage over writing blogs, although I think Amaya is here and he's great at using ChatGPT, but then if you can't write as flawlessly as ChatGPT is writing, you can create a podcast by speaking. You can grow your influence, and the side effect of creating a good and consistent podcast is people think and they perceive you as the authority in your field or in your domain wherein you are going to create the podcast. Some of the top podcast listening apps. I'm just giving you some stats before we start. So Apple leads the pack. Apple Podcast, so these are the directories or these are the apps where people go and listen to podcasts. So Apple Podcast is market leader with 30%, then Spotify, then Google, then Castbox, web browser, embedded player, and your own website. So that is the skew, right? What is the normal length of a podcast? Now, when we see 25 lakh podcasts available, what is the podcast length should be, or what is the length of my podcast? What should be the length of my podcast? So currently, whatever episodes are listed, if you go and check them, there are 16% podcasts which are less than 10 minutes. There are 15% podcasts which are between 10 to 20 minutes, 31% podcasts which are between 20 to 40, and so on and so forth. Now, if you see, you really can't distinguish between, which is the best length, because I can show you certain podcasts which are below 10 minutes and doing great. I can show you some podcasts which are above 60 minutes and doing great. And I can show you certain podcasts which are between 20 to 40 minutes, but they are not doing great. So it doesn't really matter what length. It is the content and how good you convey your message to the people, right? Normally, 20 to 40 minutes is what we use, what I do, because it gives you a lot of time breather. And when you do interview kind of podcast, it requires 40 minutes of time, right? How often people publish their episodes of podcast? No, because this is another question which will come up कि मैंने कितने episode डालने चाहिए हर महीने. So if you check every 15 days, 40% people around publish a podcast. Now there are people who are doing it in every 2 days, but these are basically, current affair, news, all those kind of things. And but then there is no restriction that when you should publish it. But then if you can select a date and weekly, fortnightly, and then publish, and then you tell your audience that, hey, every Friday I'm going to release my episode, people will wait for your podcast, right? Now, if I want, how podcast is ranked, right? If your podcast gets 5,000 kind of downloads, you know, so these stats you get from your podcast hosting site. If you get around 5,000 kind of downloads, you become top 1% podcaster in the world, right? And even if you get 30, you become 50% of the podcaster, right? Even if you get 1,000, still become 5% of the podcast, top 5% podcaster of the world. Right?
Again, to come back to the point about the flying case, it might be a silly controversy, but you cannot fault the BJP for latching on to it, because you can't on the one hand say getting
Bhagya Lakshmi needs to go on mute.
Yeah, I have made it, no problem. Right? So take that pressure out कि मुझे कितना listenership मिलेगा, how many downloads will I get? Forget about it. You know, you will get it over a period of time. So don't worry about the numbers. Even if you can touch one person's life, I think that is good enough. Go with that mindset first. Right? Now, just for my understanding, I want to understand from you, what do you think, which is the genre which is, you know, which is getting most number of downloads, or which is the popular genre in podcasting world? You can use chat box also. What do you think? Which genre is more popular in the podcasting world? Motivational, okay, great. Motivational, right? Business coaching related, okay, wonderful. Teaching, soft skills, geopolitics, wonderful. Yep.
Personal experiences.
Personal experiences, right? Mental health, wonderful. Think really big. What do you think across globe? What are the genres which are listened to? The spiritual, travel, yes. Relationship, absolutely. Technical knowledge, psychology, interviews, relationship, absolutely. Bang on.
History.
History, yes. Who said history?
History, because I think I've been hearing the podcast what is that, Dynasty, or what is that, Dalrymples, William Dalrymple.
Yes. So history ranks in top 5. History podcast ranks in top 5. Adventures, yes. Songs is a different thing altogether. Song related shows is something, you know, you can yes, go and say that yes, this is the thing. Communication skill. Let's check what are the genres which are leading the pack. So comedy number 1. So podcast related to comedy, you know, they get maximum share of listeners. Then news. Third is true crime, Southern India. है ना? Crime story सबको पसंद है, right? Sports, health and fitness, religion and faith, politics, self-help, investigative journalism. These are some of the top listers of most podcast popular genres. So it is not at all necessary for you as a trainer to really go and do a podcast on training itself, right? Because this medium has certain limitations, and you can, you know, training, consulting, coaching is my profession, but I can have some different passions also. I can create podcast on those passions also, right? So true crime is you know, another area which is picking up very fast in India. uh, in India, earlier people used to think that podcast is only in English, but since first lockdown 2020, scenarios have changed, and local languages are picking up very fast, right? So which is the fastest growing language in podcast in India? Definitely Hindi, yes. Which is the second fastest in demand podcast language? Anyone?
Gujarati.
Gujarati. Okay, wonderful.
Marathi.
Marathi is at number 3.
I
So
think
Marathi is at
Hindi.
number 3.
Hindi.
Hindi number 1, Marathi number 3. Second is
Tamil.
Tamil. Yes, Tamil is number 2. Right? Pardon? Tamil is number 2. First is Hindi, second is Tamil,
Hindi. Yeah.
third is Marathi, fourth is, you will be surprised to listen to number 4. It is Bengali. Anyone from West Bengal or Bengali?
I am a Bengali.
Wonderful. You have an opportunity, big opportunity. Right? Yeah, Hizbullah. Yes, go ahead. Create a podcast in Bengali. People are waiting. They are really waiting. Right? And fifth is Malayalam. These are the languages which are growing rapidly in this world. Another thing, if you can start your podcast in your regional language, you will automatically become the differentiator in your podcast world. There is no competition, right? There is no competition. So why I'm giving you all this is just to motivate you that don't think that I will create my podcast in English only and in training only. Forget about soft skill, communication skill, forget about your team building activities, forget everything. Explore the real you. This is what you are doing it for your profession. है ना? पेट की आग बुझाने के लिए सब कर रहे हो, लेकिन लोगों के दिलों को ठंडा करना है तो अपने पैशन वाला पॉडकास्ट बनाओ, राइट? तो let's move ahead. So this is how people will find your podcast. The first and foremost is while they're searching internet, they will stumble upon your podcast and then they will listen. If they like, they will subscribe, right? Somebody will recommend friend, family, social media. Now host recommendation plays important impact. If I tell you about some podcast, so go and listen to that podcast. You will go and listen, right? So this also plays an important role, right? And now let's come to the bad side of podcast, the not so spoken side of podcast. This word is known as pod fade. What is pod fade? Anyone? Any idea?
With the technology know-how, it dies its own death usually. With the new technology that comes up, podcast also may get outdated soon.
Oh, you are too close to it. But then this is actually death of podcast.
That's what I was going to say, that anything that dies awake.
Absolutely. But in podcasting world, it is known as pod fade, that your podcast has fade away. And what are the odds and what's the stats for pod fade? In the beginning, I told you that podcast is very easy to start. And that is the reason it is very easy to stop. Because there is no commitment, right? And in podcasting world, people say that your podcast has pod faded if you don't upload your new episode in 90 days from your last episode. So if I have uploaded my last episode on 31st of December, and if I don't upload a new episode by 31st of March, people will say my podcast has pod faded. And odds are staggering, numbers are staggering. There are 50% podcasts which get pod faded every month, right? So although it is very easy to start, and it gets pod faded, right? So I'm really worried about this because, when people start thinking about something new, they are gung-ho about it. And then after third month, they really get, कि अब क्या करेंगे? What will I say in my podcast? Right. So I'll give you an idea to overcome that. Yes. How can one sustain? Wonderful. I'll tell you that also. Right. So really, how to start a podcast? We have got two people here, those who already have podcasts. Unfortunately, their podcasts have pod faded. Fortunately, Shankarji revived it yesterday by putting up a message in his podcast, and he has revived it. So how to start a podcast? Are we interested to learn how to start a podcast? Wonderful. Give me some motivation.
Yes, yes.
Yes, we are.
Wonderful. So first and most important thing is you need to identify why do you want to start a podcast? What is the purpose? What
Correct.
is the motive behind starting a podcast? It should not just be कि मुझे करना है, मैंने कभी किया नहीं, मैंने कभी देखा नहीं. I have heard a lot about it, but I couldn't get a chance. So tonight I am getting a chance to learn how to start a podcast, but I am going to start a podcast. Now, I have given you all the stats beforehand, right? How to start, how to, what should be the downloads, how many episodes you can put, what is the pod feed. You should really ask, why should I start the podcast? So you can note down in your notepads and you can take your time, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, no problem. Think about it and write it down. Why do I want to start a podcast?
So you gave this answer yesterday, right? मेरी आवाज ही पहचान है अगर याद रहे.
So that is the motivation I get,
Yeah.
So
रहे ना रहे हम महका करेंगे बनके कली बनके समा, वही है बस, और क्या है.
Absolutely.
आवाज ही रहेगी ना.
आवाज ही रहेगी. But आवाज के पीछे आवाज क्यों रही सर?
बिल्कुल.
आप देखिए आवाज क्यों रही. लता मंगेशकर की आवाज हमको सुनाई है उस गाने के अंदर में, बट जो वर्ड्स लिखे थे जिसने किसने, पोएट्री थी, दैट वाज आल्सो इक्वली इंपॉर्टेंट.
करेक्ट.
So content is equally important in podcast because
Correct.
it is all about content.
Correct. To give value to your audience or the audience out there.
Absolutely.
And leave a legacy behind that.
Can be possible. Might be possible. Or for me, it is a medium to reach to people, to teach them.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
When I say give value means to
Or
teach
educate them. Absolutely.
Educate them.
Educate them, teach them. Anything which will, give you happiness from within. Because see, if my purpose is to earn money from this podcast, then my actions will be totally different. Every activity which I will do, I will always think from the perspective of earning money. I will always say, okay, go to my link and support my podcast, go to my Patreon link, go to my Falana link, Instamojo link, and give me, support me to create. That is not the way it should go. People should feel that then they should get attached to you, right? So first and foremost is you should ask why I want to start the podcast, right? Once you get the answer, then other things are very easy, right? Once you get that answer, then you can choose what is the format in which I want to create my podcast. Just understand, I'm going to share exactly the same PPT to you in the group, right? Just understand. So there are 5-6 different types of format which people normally use in podcast, right? First is, what is how long my episode should be, what equipments to buy, where should I record my first episode, and how to get into Apple and Spotify and a whole lot of other apps. So let's understand what are the podcast formats which I can create. First is solo, solo format wherein I go and I do monologue, wherein you are master of one topic, you go and you speak about that topic to the people. Then you can create that solo kind of a format, but then it has got its limitations. You cannot create a solo monologue, मन की बात, मन की बात भी 15 मिनट से ऊपर नहीं चलती है, right? Plus 15 minutes of solo narrative requires a lot of preparation. You will have to really prepare a lot many things, right? So you can go in for solo. Another thing which is currently prevailing and many people are using it is interview kind of a podcast, wherein you really bring in guests on your podcast, you take their interviews and then you record it and then you send it. So people get really interesting guests on their podcast. popularity of podcast, you can gauge. How many of you have noticed that in last 3 months, many of the central government ministers are coming on podcast? Have you noticed this trend?
Yes.
Why do you think so? They are coming to podcasts.
Maybe visibility, the real connecting with the people and showing that what they are doing, maybe the kind of work they are doing, or maybe that's the motive. And the vote bank, yes.
See, I don't know, have you noticed it or not? People in upper strata of life, they listen to all these kind of intellectual gyan in podcast, right? And they don't watch TV. So this Smita Prakash podcast, right? ANI podcast, Smita Prakash podcast.
Yes.
She has got 3 million views on YouTube for S. Jayashankar's podcast. But she has got 6 million downloads in her audio format of that same podcast. Just imagine 60, 70 lakh people listening to your podcast intently, whole podcast, 40, 45 minute podcast.
That's amazing.
Even if you watch a series on Netflix or Prime, you don't get that kind of engagement. People will forward some part.
Right? Correct. Right.
So interview kind of podcasts are really working well. Third is scripted non-fiction. So ये Kuku FM and all that सब आ रहा है ना apps, Kuku FM आ रहा है, Pocket FM आ रहा है, तो इसमें सब scripted non-fiction होते हैं, stories बताते हैं, है ना? So all these stories. News recap, you can create a news recap also, and it works wonderfully well. I'll give you certain ideas also. Educational podcast. Now you can really tap educational podcast in a way wherein you can create something for people aspiring for IITs, people aspiring from IIScs, people aspiring to go to Sainik schools, or someone who wanted to go to NDA. These are kind of educational podcasts, or dedicated to chemistry, biology, physics, mathematics, arts, sciences, humanities, liberal arts, n number of things. And then there is another kind of a thing called as scripted fiction. You can also do that. So if you can get a good content writer for you, you can get good scripted fiction kind of a podcast. Now, it is very difficult to stick to one format and keep going with your podcast. So what I would recommend is go with mix of everything. Right? Go with mix of everything. So solo and interview podcast should work well with you as a beginner, because solo, in between one episode you can create 3-4 episodes of your solo, and then you can get people on your podcast as a guest, and you can keep putting guests in between your solo podcast. And if you are putting 2 episodes per month, then 4 episodes in a hand is your 2 months work is done. So you will not be under pressure to create content for the sake of creating content, right? So you will be in peace with yourself. Even if you miss 1 week, you don't have that deadline wala pressure कि कुछ तो बना के डालना है करके, right? ये होता है, मैंने देखा है बहुत लोगों के साथ में. Another thing is, this interview podcast works well, and I think you can write down this in your notebook. Normally I never did it purposely, but then I got the benefits of it. Normally you can target your customers, or you can create ideal customer persona, target your customers. Your customers are L&D, OD, HR. You can bring them to your podcast as a guest. Don't speak about the organization. Speak about in general what's happening in L&D, OD, OJT kind of world. Wherein they feel that they have been valued by you. You create a band and kind of a bond and rapport with them. And your work assignments is the outcome of it without asking for it. Getting my point? Right?
Right.
And you can get a number of guests on your podcast. It will automatically give you the authority on your social media. See some CEO coming onto your podcast and speaking with you about something HR or training or whatever domain you're working with. Do I need to tell the world that I am authority? People will think, अरे CEO आके बात कर रहे हैं इसके podcast पे तो he is good यार. Yes or no?
Of course. And cashing
Absolutely.
on somebody else's credits.
Absolutely. Right? So don't think of monetizing your podcast per se, but yes, bring in excellent people on your podcast, which are normally not seen everywhere, right? So they will give you a lot of insights. So you can use all these kind of format for your podcast. Another thing, how many of you stay in a gated community? चलो relationship improvement podcast में मैं बता देता हूँ आज आप. How to improve relationship within your gated community. Right? So जितने लोग रहते हैं, you can use your podcast for your community. So DLF 39 can be a good podcast name, ma'am.
Yeah.
है ना?
That is relating to gardening.
Absolutely. Gardening at DLF 39 can be a podcast name. You can bring in all your, DLF वाले लोग एक one by one as a podcast guest, record them, and society के अंदर ही 1000 लोग सुन लेंगे आपका, and you become the celebrity authority.
We've just started a newsletter, so now this will be a new idea. Thank you.
Yes, forget about newsletter. Newsletter is bland. Right? That is bland. It is wherein your voice will go to each and every household. People will listen to you, and they will say, "Hey, Bina, I have listened to your podcast here. Next time take me also as a guest on your podcast." Right? And think if there are 10 CEOs staying in the same area, you get direct approach, entry to those 10 CEOs. Right? Naming your podcast. How to name your podcast? So now you can keep anything, right? There is, I just cannot tell you what name you should keep, but then it should be clear, concise, unique, specific, and again, SEO optimizable. Now, SEO optimizable is because, should be searchable on Google. Ultimately, we are at the mercy of Google. So SEO optimizable agar rahega to acha rahega. But then you can name your podcast on your own name, whatever, right? Like we said, ki DLF 39 Gardeners is very specific name, So you can keep anything, whatever you like, but then don't keep कि वो इसके पिक्चर आते हैं ना, सूरज कुमार बढ़ जाता है कि कभी कुछ ये अपने बहुत सारे रहते हैं ना, हम आपके कौन, राजा को रानी से प्यार हो गया, छोटा सा रखिए, थोड़ा छोटा रखिए, ताकि मुझे पता चले कि हाँ, yes, amazing medium was different, but purpose was same, to build goodwill with potential client. Correct. So थोड़ा छोटा क्रिस्प नाम रखिए, खुद का नाम रखोगे, I think wonderful. अब हमारा खुद का नाम भी बहुत अच्छा है, right? Now podcast में we need images, right? So images में podcast image specification जैसा YouTube चैनल के ऊपर specification होता है, वैसा podcast के लिए भी आपका podcast चैनल का image लगता है, which should be 3000 by 3000 pixel, 72 dpi. Now you can go to Canva and directly get it. Canva में there is an option podcast images. Go there, search for podcast images, enter. He will give you n number of options. Pick and choose one. Create your own design and just throw it away. You are ready with your podcast design, right? Podcast description is another thing which people go through. What this podcast is all about, is a description around 2000 words you can use and describe about your own podcast. You can put in your email ID, your website address, your mode of connecting with you, everything in that podcast description. Now, what do I need to start my podcast? There are prerequisite requirement. to start a podcast. First is microphone. Why microphone? To record my voice. Now I'm using this earphone, Samsung wala, right? This is also giving good voice, but as and when I need to, get quality voice, I need quality microphones. But again, I'm telling you, this is not required at this stage of yours. You can simply use your earpods, right? Or you can, if you want to buy, you can go and buy a 700 rupees worth of mic called Boya. It is available on Amazon. I'll write down the name, right? Boya, Boya. It costs around 700 rupees. One of the best microphone, value for money, and it will give you amazing quality. It has got nice noise cancellation. It will give you great you know uh, voice clarity. In future, whenever you want to go as a pro, you can buy Rode podcaster mic or Rode USB mic or Audio Technica. These are all 10,000 K plus mics. At this point of time, I don't want you to buy this. Go with Boya. It will work well for your YouTube videos also. Whenever you want to record YouTube videos, this mic will give you great voice. It's a wired microphone and it has got around 3-meter wire, so 10 feet long. So you can use that for your videos also, right? You need desktop and laptop. Desktop and laptop for editing your audio. You need editing software. Now the great part is everything is free. There is a software called Audacity, Audacity. It is available. It's a free software, and it has got everything to edit your podcast. Whatever any good software can give you. For people who are using Mac, Apple fan, they should get Garage installed in their MacBooks or on mobile phone. Both these softwares are free. Now, there is a learning curve for these softwares, right? And another good news is I will share you the link in the group for learning videos. It will take you around 2 hours to learn this software, and then you can refine your skills by using it again and again. So I will share you the links for Audacity and GarageBand learning videos, which is again available on YouTube, and it's free of cost. And it's very easy. If you can use any app on your mobile, you can use Audacity and GarageBand. Why this is required? Because when you record your solos or when you record your interview episodes sitting at home, there are unwanted noises which your microphone will capture. So we need to really delete those. And editing will enhance the quality of podcast which will offer to your listeners. So editing is required, right? So normally, as a amateur, I normally take around for 10-minute podcast, it takes me something around 40 to 45 minutes to edit. And I'm going to give you certain hacks also going forward, not now, because then it will not be of any use to you if I give it to you everything today itself. So editing software is Audacity and GarageBand. And then what we require is podcast hosting site. Why podcast hosting site is required? You need to, list your podcast somewhere. You need to actually upload your file somewhere. In case of videos, it is YouTube, wherein you are using it. In case of podcast, there are a number of podcast hosting sites wherein you upload your all these things, and from there you distribute to the world. And what are those? So these are the websites wherein you go, like Spotify. They have a podcast hosting site known as Anchor. So Anchor they bought in last year. Anchor is a podcast hosting site which is available for free. You can start your podcast using Anchor for free within minutes, and they won't charge you a single dime for hosting your website, hosting your podcast. But then they will not let you monetize your podcast till the time you reach certain amount of downloads. Plus, they will start monetizing your podcast from day one. So they will start putting advertisement in between your podcast. Also, they will not give you entire statistics मिलते हैं हमको, वो सारे entire statistics आपको शायद नहीं मिलेंगे. Another thing is called as Buzzsprout. I'll come to that on later. Then there are certain podcast recording software for remote guest. So there are, when you want to record a guest using, video. So ultimately we use Zoom. So you can use Zoom, record the podcast, download the episode, remove, extract the audio and create that podcast. But Zoom sometimes lags. Have you noticed? कभी-कभी Zoom में आवाज एकदम दब जाता है, फिर it takes double X speed and so that is really cumbersome to edit. So there are certain websites which are available for free. You can, as a starter beginner, you can use them for free. They have certain limitations, so they will allow you 2 hours of content only to record for first month, kind of a thing. But then you can really use them well. The difference between Zoom and all these top 4 is they will allow you to record native audio voices. So 2 audio files will be generated, 2 video files will be generated, one at the other person's end and one at your end. You can download that file to your website. So there is no lag or there is no loss of voice in between that recording, right? So Zencaster is one you can try. Zencaster is really good. You can use this in your normal life also, not only to record podcast. You can use this for, this will give you crystal clear voice and crystal clear video. Riverside is also another good recording software which is there. It is SaaS-based product, so you can go log in and you can start recording immediately. Alitu and Squadcast. So I have used Zencaster and Squadcast. Zoom I use regularly. Riverside and Alitu I haven't used it, but I have heard great reviews about it. So you can use them for recording video interviews for long distances. This is the typical setup which we get. This is the typical setup which we get for recording our podcast. This is the same Blue Yeti mic which I got. This is the laptop and you can record and then you can start editing. It is as simple as that. Yesterday's message which I sent you, I recorded on that only. And then you can also go in and you also have an option to go to studio. Now, whichever city you are staying, you can explore this option also if you want to spend money. But then that's spending that money will be worth because these professional studios will give you awesome quality output. These microphones, they range somewhere between 2.5 lakh rupees. So the quality of voice you will get in these microphones will be out of the world. And they come at a very economy. 1 hour of audio recording, the studio will charge you somewhere between $1,000 to 1,200 rupees per hour. So you can really create your all content, go to studio, get it recorded, and then he will give you the polished output, edited version of your podcast. So your life will be easy. You don't have to learn all those things of editing and all that stuff. But then to begin with, I will really encourage you to do it by yourself so that you appreciate the amount of work. The more you edit, the better script writer you will become. ये मेरा खुद का अनुभव है. जब रिकॉर्ड करते थे इम्प्रॉम्प्टू तो मुझे ऐसा लगता था कर दो. Then I used to curse myself. क्या बोल रहा हूँ मैं? I need to edit it here. So then I started writing diligently. So this is another, benefit which I got. Right?
इसके साथ में रख देना. ये फ्रिज में ये अपना है.
So you get by paying 1,000 rupees, you will get all these things, right? Before you start your own podcast, first episode, you need to make your script. You need to really write bullet points. There are certain people who write all the script in detail, but then otherwise what will happen? is Anchor is now changed to Spotify. Spotify has bought them. So what people normally do is they write everything and they start reading it, and then people get bored. No, so you should what practice I do is I write bullet points and then I build upon it, because you have opportunity to edit it, delete it. You can take so many number of takes on it, right? And once you write the bullet points, then understand the approach to your script and understand voice modulation. Another critical area in podcasting in solo is voice modulation. And you can, I'll share you one link. I will ask the person, and she is one of the great voice artists in India. So she came to one of my workshop and she has given lessons about how to modulate your voice. I'll share that link. I'll ask her once and then I'll share the link in the group. Just do not redistribute it somewhere outside the group. So it's 1.5 hours of just anything about voice modulation, how to modulate your voice, how to make various different noises using your tongue, using your mouth, and using your throat. So I'll share that. It's in Hindi, but there is a limitation. It's in Hindi. So modulation plays critical role, right? Once you write the outline, pick a calm and quiet place, because there are people. India is a place of honking people. People will keep on honking their vehicles. So get a calm and quiet place. Set up your microphone. Have a cup of herbal tea or garam pani. Garam pani will give you a lot of your throat thoda aaram milega, and start recording, right? And don't judge yourself. Record and send it to your friends. They are your accountability buddies, and they are the people who will actually encourage you, because हम लोग है ना, हमारे सबसे खराब क्रिटिक होते हैं खुद के, right? So don't judge yourself, let them judge. And then edit your episode. Use Audacity, GarageBand or Adobe Audition. बैकग्राउंड नॉइजेस, मिक्सर चल रहा है, कुकर की सीटी बज गई, सब गायब कर दो. And then your episode is ready. Now you need good song or good music to your podcast. Now this podcast intro and outro music. Intro is which is playing in the beginning, and जो outro होता है वो भी same ही होता है. You can get all the theme music free of cost on YouTube. Go to YouTube Studio, ask for copyright free audio music. YouTube will give you a list of more than 5,000 copyright free music pieces. You can download it and you can use them, right? Then there is Audio Jungle, a website called Audio Jungle, wherein you get great amount of music. Ben Sound, or if you want, you can go to a studio and tell them that I want a piece of music created for me. They will charge you 3, 4, 5,000 rupees. Or you can go to this website also and buy a paid version of that tune, right? Don't use any song which is, yesterday I've used that piece, that was for internal purpose. But if you want to go for a podcast, don't use any of the copyrighted material. Your podcast will get banned immediately. Apple is very critical about this, and YouTube is also. So they will immediately, strike down your podcast. So don't use any copyrighted music, copyrighted song anywhere in the world, right? So there are n number of free music tunes available on YouTube, Audio Jungle, Ben Sound. You can go to this site and you can download it from them. Don't use copyrighted music. They are very serious about it. Right? I've seen many podcasts getting banned because of this, right? So once you do that, export your episode. The best format is WAV file. WAV file has got best quality output, but then you can also create it in MP3. MP3 format is also good, but in 44K, 48K hertz, if you can get, then nothing like it. but best format is WAV, but then files are quite bigger. So MP3 is okay, right? Now, why do we need to have a good, reliable podcast host, right? There are four important things. First is bandwidth. How many downloads my podcast host will allow for my podcast? RSS feed. RSS stands for really simple syndication. It will give you a ID to your podcast, which will be used across all the podcast distribution apps like Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, a number of things. And is he giving you embedded player, and what are the social sharing tools available with that podcast platform, right? So you can use Buzzsprout. I use Buzzsprout, which is available for free for first 90 days, and I use Buzzsprout, but you can also use Anchor, which is really free. But apart from Buzzsprout, there are Podiant, Social Cloud. Libsyn is the oldest. LIBSYN. This platform is the first platform which was made available for podcasters to upload their podcast, right? So Libsyn was the first, but then currently Buzzsprout hosts more than 7 lakh podcasts with them. Then your Anchor, which is now been taken over by Spotify. You can use Spotify to begin with, right? These are the podcast apps. These are the directories where your podcast should get listed. Once you upload your episode on Anchor or Buzzsprout, you will have to do it for once to list your podcast. And if you can get your podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon Music, which is Alexa, and I think you will cover most of it. 99% of the podcast listening world you will cover. So forget about trace. These are also required. But then in India, if you see in the world also, market is dominated by top four: Apple, Spotify, Google, and Amazon, right? So you can get your podcast listed over there, and then you can safely say that anybody will be able to search your podcast, right? Another thing, whenever you want to launch your podcast, I'm giving you a bonus tip: launch with minimum 3 episodes. So on day one, there should be 3 episodes. First is introduction to your podcast and 2 more episodes. Because first day people have, lot of enthusiasm to listen to your podcast. People will listen all 3 podcasts. The moment they listen to 3 podcasts, they will subscribe your podcast, and then you can always announce that after 3rd episode, you can always say every Friday, listen to my podcast. You can give a call to action kind of a thing. But launch with minimum 3 episodes. That will really give that kick in for your podcast, right? So do that. Whenever you do that, choose your grand opening date. Share your podcast link with your family and friends. Go in and announce your podcast launch in all relevant social media groups. Go to all influencers, tell them about your podcast, tell them to brag about it, and just enjoy your podcast launch and celebrate your hard work to launch the podcast, right? So there are certain analytical tools which are available. First is the analytical tool which I use is Chartable. Chartable actually ranks all the podcasts in the world according to the genre, according to the episode, and it will tell you whether your podcast is in top 20s of the world kind of a thing. And it's very thrilling and it is very dynamic. Every day the stats change. It is free of cost. So you can actually go to Chartable and check your podcast where it is standing or ranking right away. So it will give you stats according to the genre, according to your country, according to your language. There are n number of ways it will show you where your podcast is ranking, right? So Anchor will give you their own stats. So Anchor will definitely not give you Chartable stats, but they will give you their own. So those people, those who will upload their episodes on Anchor or Spotify, they will get stats only through Anchor or Spotify. They won't be able to get stats through Chartable. So that is the only difference you have, right? So this is how you can start. It's very easy, right, to start a podcast. And as I know, it has been my experience that it is practically not possible to start or tell you in detail about podcast in 1.5 hours. We are going to meet again. How many of you are ready to meet again? Huh? Right.
I am.
Yes, wonderful. So I am also ready. We can meet probably next week, right? So why next week is because you will have time to think on your podcast, right? And why I'm starting podcast, why I do want to start a podcast, what will be the topic, and number of things. You will also be able to, absorb the things. You will have this directory also, this PPT also to ponder over it, and then you will have a really, pointed questions for me, wherein I can actually help you to start your podcast. Right? So just don't think about बहुत सारा चीजें करना है, एडिटिंग कैसे करूंगा, रिकॉर्डिंग कैसे करूंगा, ये पॉडकास्ट होस्टिंग साइट क्या होता है. फॉरगेट अबाउट दैट. फॉरगेट अबाउट योर ओन पॉडकास्ट राइट नाउ, है ना. लेट्स गो स्टेप बाय स्टेप. अभी हमको पूरी जर्नी एक रात में नहीं कवर करना है. सो लेट्स गो स्टेप बाय स्टेप. आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू डिसॉल्व दिस ग्रुप. This group is going to be there, right? And we will really use this group well to launch our podcast. For me, the target is, if 25 people are there today in the group, 25 should launch their podcast. That is the Guru Dakshina, launching your own podcast, right? So, and I'm sure you will be able to launch this within next 15 days, right? So एकदम आसानी से हो सकता है, right? So, and I'm there to help each and every one of you. Go, please don't worry कि कैसे पूछूंगा. I'll help each and every one of you to launch your podcast. So name of my podcast is Sales का तड़का. Sales का तड़का. So before you people go, I'm going to open this group for question and answers. But if before you go, I just wanted to take a picture to brag about our today's workshop in Gamestormers group. Is it okay? Okay, wonderful. Give me a moment. I will just pick.
Make the P sign, everybody. P.
Yes, P.
P. So podcasting कर रहे हैं अभी. P.
Give me a moment. I will just. Wonderful. आगे सब लोग नहीं आए. Yes, everyone is there. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So that's all from my end, but I'm open for questions. So we have 20 minutes time. You can ask me whatever questions you have. I will share this PPT at the end of this session in the group.
Aniruddha, first of all, an absolute, massive thank you for from each and every one of us here. I think you have been, talking continuously for close to about 70 minutes right now. Your, enthusiasm, the width and depth of the knowledge that you have about this subject was absolutely relevant.
Mhm.
And, now we know why your, podcast is so super successful and so popular. So we actually got a glimpse of it, along with the video part of it today.
Okay. Okay. No. Thank you so much for your compliment. But I still don't think that way. I just think that I am a page ahead of all of you in podcasting. I know, just a chapter better than you, just one chapter ahead better than you. Tomorrow, when you launch your podcast, we all will be on the same chapter again. It happens with me a lot of time. कोई स्टूडेंट आके पूछता है, अरे ये ऐसा नहीं हो रहा है सर, ऐसा कैसा करेंगे? मैं बोलता हूँ 2 मिनट रुक जा, मुझे देखने दे, मैं कल बताता हूँ तुझे, है ना? बिकॉज और बहुत बार क्या होता है कि जो यंग जनरेशन है ना, जेन जेड, दे आर टेक सेवी, तो वही आके हमको ज्ञान देके जाते, तो उनका हाँ, गुड 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 गुड, अच्छा किया तूने ये किया. So, but no, thank you for the compliment, sir.
Yeah. Look forward to the next meeting.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The simplicity, about the whole thing, the way you made it so simple. Now I think, oh yes, yeah, I can take that step.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Beauty lies in simplicity.
Yes.
And
my compliments to you. I thought you may be making it very complicated or something, but you said it shows your genuinity that you wanted to give everything what you have instead of hiding it like a salesman. I will tell this later, you need not have to. So you're just open, and there's no, I didn't find anything the salesmanship in this. It's all you wanted to give it back to the community that you know. So that intention is very good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Being kind and modest, I would say. He's being kind and modest.
So I'll tell you one more thing. See, I learned it from YouTube and Buzzsprout. Everything. I have, I never knew this used to be there in the world, podcasting. So I started. When I started searching about podcasting, I used to get courses from, there are people who are doing a lot of podcasting courses, recorded courses. And there is a influencer called Pat Flynn, PATFLYNN. He sells his course at, close to $500. $500. Can you imagine? And I got tempted so many times to purchase kar lete yaar. But then I said, nahi, pehle explore karte, fir purchase karte. And I think zarurat hi nahi padi. I'm going to share a link with you from a website called Buzzsprout. I'm not promoting them. I'm not affiliated to them. But they have a course, email course of 7 days, which will actually teach you everything actually I taught you today, right? It's a 7-day course. At the end of 7th day, whenever we are going to meet next week, you will be ready with your podcast. That I can assure you. And at to free of cost. It will cover each point in depth for you. Right? So I'm going to share that link also.
Aniruddha, thank you so much. I mean, I would just like to say that I'm speechless. You made it so easy. I mean, a lot of confidence. You said a lot of things. The link that you are going to share or you have shared is more about confidence. That is what I could feel, because we haven't seen the link. We haven't touched the link. We haven't opened the link. But then every word that you said, because I don't live in a cave, so I have heard many podcasts, and I've been thinking that, wow, it must be very difficult. But then, honestly speaking, as one gentleman said, that there was no salesmanship. When Sankar sir started, yesterday also Sankar sir, when he gave that, I was wondering, I said, wow, it is so easy, And one thing I loved about, apart from your voice and as a human being, though we haven't met other than virtually, the intention was very, very clean.
Yeah.
You wanted 25 podcasters.
Absolutely. I wanted 50. 50 people are there in the group.
So I simply loved it. I mean, this is going to stay with me, whether I podcast or not, but then I will never forget. Yes. Thank you so very much. Thank you so much.
But you should start your podcast, sir.
I will. What about my voice? Will I be able?
you're absolute. Your voice is
Everyone has.
phenomenal. Ask me.
I'm being very honest. Today was my 7th day of training. So I am croaking like a frog. Continuous 7 days. So it just got over. So that's the reason why I asked you. I said, this is the right time to ask whether the voice is okay, gone, bad.
Bengalis are blessed with baritone voices.
No, I'm not. A lot of people confuse. I'm very that way. I live very close to Bengal. I am in Bhubaneswar. So
I know. Yes. But then eastern part, I will say.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
So see, sir, Amitabh Bachchan, look at his baritone. You know.
Okay.
And ask your girlfriend about your own voice.
Oh,
if you have any, she will say.
I got to find. I got to hunt.
She will say you got that. Yeah, absolutely. So don't ask your wife. I never asked my wife.
Okay.
How good my voice is. She said, "Bekar awaaz hai aapka."
But thank you so much. It was wonderful, Aniruddha. Where are you located? Where are you staying?
I'm based out of Nagpur.
Okay, Nagpur.
Yes.
So sometime across whenever I go out on training.
Please, I would love to meet.
I'll definitely catch you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
sir.
Very, very much. For your
and thank you, everyone. I mean, I would like to thank Amey because I keep reading everything that he posts. So, Amey, you are there, part of it, even Sankar, sir, I mean, the rest of all of you. So, it is wonderful having all of you. So, it is great. So, thank you so very much.
So, you do trainings and in which area?
Well, I am a certified FIS philosophy trainer. And I use another international tool called Lego Serious Play. So I keep doing the leadership training. I was into insurance for nearly 17 years. That apart, I train quite a number of, all the oil companies. I train a lot of, because these are my exclusive area. Like I'm a fish trainer. So nobody does fish in India. So I do organizational culture training for Reserve Bank, Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum. So,
Wonderful.
So that's how I keep doing.
But I'll tell you, sir, apart from professional interest, just keep looking in which area you can create your podcast.
I will definitely. I will definitely look into it because I do a little bit of storytelling. I go to different schools to do storytelling. So
and I'll tell you, it is only the first episode which takes most of the time. The moment you go with your first episode, then the world is open to you. And I'll tell you, you have got great voice. I think.
Oh, thank you so much.
Another thing which I will tell you is you should actually think about voiceover artist career.
Oh wow!
Oh wow!
So, I'll tell you two things to each and every one of you. Every voice is unique. Every city will have. Every city. Yeah, it will have audio studios. Right? It will have audio studios. Go to audio studios. Give your voice sample. Tell them if you want, I can give my voiceover. You know.
Okay. I will definitely look into that area.
Please go. You know, I know a person who does 3 documentaries recording every day for Mr. Nitin Gadkari.
Oh wow!
तो उनका हर प्रोग्राम होता है ना, उसके पीछे एक वो वीडियो चलता है, राइट? 5 मिनट 10 मिनट का.
वॉइस आर्टिस्ट.
So he's a voice artist. वही बनाता है, वही स्क्रिप्ट लिखता है, वही जाता है, रिकॉर्ड करके आता है, खत्म हो गया. Now I'll tell you another career option to you. He charges 4,000 rupees.
Aniruddha sir, before I forget, because I don't have a memory like you. Before I forget, one more thing which I loved about this entire meeting that we had, you never restricted us to think only about training. You said, look other areas. The podcast need not be about what you are training. It can about your passion. So that is another thing which I really loved it. That's nice. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Otherwise, we are too laser sharp in our approach. True. Now you can speak on dance, you can speak on music, you can speak on history, you can speak about your own gardening in your own apartment gated community. There is no restriction at all. Why do you want to restrict myself?
Okay.
Right.
So I will be meeting very soon. That
Can do.
means. Thank you so much, sir.
And
Thank you very much, sir.
Do talk to local audio studios and give them your voice
Okay.
sample.
Okay.
Right,
I
and
will.
that will be rather career path. It's a very interesting world. I'll tell you, you'll be
I
amazed
swear,
what
I
kind of
completely agree with.
money these people command. I know certain people who charge 25,000 rupees per hour for their voiceover.
Oh,
You
That's
will
big.
forget about training 8 hours and getting 20,000 rupees. Mark my word.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So yesterday I heard about Shankar sir's voice, and today I could make out because you spoke. I haven't heard about others apart from Beena and Shamla and Devani. But then you have got that voice. You should, and you must give a sample.
Okay, I will give a try, and that will be my Guru Dakshina.
Absolutely.
Aniruddha sir, I have a request.
Don't call me sir, yaar. वो sir का उस दिन ही बता दिया. Call
Okay.
Aniruddha.
Aniruddha,
I'm very.
after listening to, I must really first of all, let me thank you for a beautiful session. It was so comprehensive, and you never said that this is the first session, so I'll give you only this much. No, the whole works. So it was really lovely, and it was so fascinating. I could not look away from the, this little box was my world for this last 1 hour, more than an hour. Thank you so much. Lovely.
Pleasure is all mine.
With that, I'll just say that, as a kid, when I was a kid, I used to be very conscious of my voice because I know I have a rather deep voice for a woman. So I was always thinking, no, only because that was the kind of thing projected in those days. You have to have a beautiful round face, and your voice has to be a little sweet, high pitch. I was none of those things. So I always had a little. I would speak the way, not that my voice can't reach the higher octaves, but I used to speak a little lower tone. So I think your tone matters a lot. Rather than I like to bring it not from the throat but right from the chest.
Yes.
And
Really?
I like to throw my voice because as a trainer, as a teacher, as a trainer, I've always found that helpful. Throwing my voice is more more comfortable for me and for the listeners. It is not harsh on the ears, and it has greater reachability, so without being loud.
Absolutely.
So that is one thing I learned, and I don't know whether I love my voice. Now that you ask me, I'll think about it, but I do think it is something unique. It's different.
Absolutely.
And you made me realize that today, your voice, Meri Awaaz, that was a beautiful piece. Meri Awaaz hi meri pehchan hai. Now I'll go with that.
Yes.
And I'll explore whatever things I'm passionate about.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Thank you so much.
Good. Thanks.
Shamala, what she said reminded me of something, So I used to call, so I worked with the oil and gas industry for 32 years. Oh. And so initially my role involved, I had to call up to get the supplies on time. I had to call up the refinery. And the telephone operator would pick up the phone, and he was very fascinated with my voice. That's what he said. And he would, those days you had to connect to somebody. So he'll tell me,
yes.
I know you want to speak to 2 people, 3 people. Tell me who all. Don't disconnect. I will take that call once you're done. I'll be listening and I'll connect. So one day, he came to our office, the office in which I was, for whatever people come to head office. And he came and found out who's Devyani. And then he found me out and he had a chat with me. He said, I wanted to see who you are because you have a very different voice than others. So I had a good laugh. I said, but you came all the way to see me. So he said, no, I'll tell you my life story. I was very fascinated with the voice. And and those days I was a young man and I wanted to, get married to that lady. Now that time he was an old man when he's telling me the story. So I heard that voice, and when I went to meet, I said, I want to meet Miss So and so, and they showed me that's Miss So and so. She was an old lady.
Oh, yes.
So I quietly went away without meeting her. So he
Oh,
says, so when I heard your voice, I was reminded very much of that lady.
right.
So hilarious.
Mm.
So when Shamala said this, I remembered that guy. It was so
No,
hilarious.
nah, nah. Great, great. No, no, your voice is so impactful. Every time, people will know you with your voice only. All right.
Yeah,
So,
great.
absolutely.
So, yeah.
Good. So, if we don't have any more questions, I'll stop the recording first.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just want to say